the new theater of the mind. The Clown Prince of Doom. The Bruce Collins Show, daring to take radio past the point of no return.
Welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show. We're very glad to have you join us. Tonight, we'll be talking about Freemasonry and the Royal Arch of Enoch and the Masons' influence on early America. Joining us once again will be Robert Sullivan. The Bruce Collins Show airs every Friday night at midnight right here at WWPR 1490 AM. You can listen to past archives of the Bruce Collins Show at ipbn-fm.com. That's ipbn-fm.com. There's a tab just for the Bruce Collins Show on the Intrepid Paradigm Broadcasting Network website. Again, that's ipbn-fm.com. We would appreciate it if you're able to spread the word for our show by word of mouth, social media, or in whatever creative way you can. Also, we have a Facebook page for the Bruce Collins Show. Please like us there. And you can email the show at bruce_collins_show@aol.com. Drop us a line and say, well, a hoop-de-doo and a howdy-doody. The Bruce Collins Show also has a YouTube station. Visit YouTube, search for the Bruce Collins Show channel, subscribe, and catch all the latest shows on YouTube. And now, as you know, the Bruce Collins Show always likes to have a little news, albeit strange news, in our weekly format. Here's one. Major League pitcher Max Scherzer, new this season to the Washington Nationals, informed manager Matt Williams in March, according to a New York Times report, that he requires assistance when he warms up during daily practice sessions. He spoke of the importance of simulating actual game conditions, and since Scherzer is a starting pitcher, he needed someone to stand beside him and hum the Star-Spangled Banner before he begins his practice pitching. New York Times, March 2nd, 2015. Burger King Japan commenced an April rollout, limited in duration and only in Japan, of Burger King branded cologne, mimicking the Whopper savory flame-grilled scent. Early reviews were favorable, even though the launch date, suspiciously, was April 1st. A small Virginia defense contractor won a $7 million job recently to help Pentagon analysts sift through supercomputer research, and according to the industry watchdog Defense One, the firm has decided to stick with its long-ago selected original name. Even though events have overtaken that name, the company will still be known as ISIS Defense. That's from DefenseOne.com, March 9th, 2015. Surveillance cameras revealed a man with a gun inside the Circle K in Palm Bay, Florida on January 31st. Since the clerk was in the back with the cash register locked, the man decided to wait for him for 17 seconds, according to the video. But then, impatient, he fled empty-handed. According to a February Ormond Beach, Florida police report, Matt Simeone, age 26, handed a hold-up note implying that he was armed to a SunTrust bank teller who walked away to get money. Simeone grew weary of waiting and left empty-handed, but was arrested minutes later. And that's it for the wacky news this week. Up next, in a moment, Robert Sullivan joins us to talk about his research into Freemasonry and the Royal Arch of Enoch. And joining us once again this week is Robert W. Sullivan IV. Robert W. Sullivan IV is a philosopher, historian, antiquarian, jurist, theologian, writer, and lawyer. The only child of antique dealers, he was born on October 30th, 1971 in Baltimore, Maryland. He has worked at various law firms in the Baltimore area, practicing primarily in the area of insurance defense. Mr. Sullivan is a Freemason, having joined Amicable St. John's Lodge, number 25, Baltimore, Maryland, in 1997. He became a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason in 1999, Valley of Baltimore, Orient of Maryland. His book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism, was first published in 2012. It's the product of 20 years of research. In 2014, Robert published his second book, Cinema Symbolism, A Guide to Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies. He is currently writing its sequel titled Cinema Symbolism 2, More Esoteric Imagery from Popular Movies, as well as his first work of fiction, A Pact with the Devil, the story of Elizabeth Byrne Black and her involvement with the occult, black magic, and the dark arts. Sullivan is also writing another book on Masonry titled Freemasonry and the Path to Babylon. For more information about Robert, you can visit his website, robertwsullivan4.com or robertwsullivan.iv.com. Robert Sullivan, welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show.
Hey, Bruce, thanks for having me back on. It's my pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's great to have you back, and always let me know when future books are coming out, because we'll be happy to have you back on. Now, first, about this book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism. First, what is the Royal Arch of Enoch?
The Royal Arch of Enoch is a ceremony, a ritual that is part of the high degrees of Freemasonry. It is not part of the Blue Lodge. It is part of the high degrees. And when I say the Blue Lodge, this is the degrees that you need to take in order to become a Freemason, a Master Mason. These are the degrees that consist of the Entered Apprentice degree, which is the first degree. The second degree is Fellowcraft, and the third degree is the Master Mason degree. Once you complete the Master Mason degree, you are a Freemason. At that point in time, you can do one of a couple things. Nothing. You can stay in the Blue Lodge and have no problems. Or what a lot of Masons do, and again, this is completely voluntary. No one twists your arm into this. You can join one. In the United States, there are really two premier high degree bodies. Both are voluntary, and they are not mutually exclusive. You can join one, you can join both, you can join neither. The one is the York Rite of Freemasonry, and the other is the Scottish Rite. The Royal Arch of Enoch is a high degree in both degrees. In both high degree systems. It is the 7th degree in the York Rite, and it is the 3rd degree in the Scottish. These symbolisms and philosophies are coming out of that really help define the United States. And there's a historical anomaly going on as well with the cultivation of this ritual. And this is really the main thesis of the Royal Arch of Enoch book.
Most Christians are not interested in the Book of Enoch, but there are some. But why are Freemasons interested in the Book of Enoch?
Well, it's a book that, you're correct, it's left out of the Bible. And Enoch is important. His name literally means, the initiated one. And it's in the Book of Enoch, in the book of Genesis in the Bible, Enoch is one of two people to never experience a physical death, Enoch and the prophet Elijah. Enoch's mentioned in the book of Genesis as being taken off into heaven in corporeal form. What the book of Enoch documents is what he sees in heaven in his interactions with a bunch of archangels, fallen angels, and in this high degree ceremonial is incorporating components of the lost book of Enoch, and it's unique because it deals with things of like apotheosis, becoming godlike. It has very Kabbalistic overtones. It has to deal with a restoration of wisdom in this Masonic ritual. And the entire thesis of the book, the main thesis of the book, is that when this high degree ritual called the Royal Arch of Enoch, it comes out of the original high degree ceremonial body, I guess would be what I would call it, which is called the Rite of Perfection. It comes out of Paris, France in the 1740s, 1750s. And it's originally 25 degrees. The Royal Arch of Enoch is the 13th degree, and it's incorporating components of the Book of Enoch. The problem is that the Book of Enoch, I Enoch, was lost to Western civilization from around the 2nd, 3rd century, all the way up until 1773, when a man named James Bruce returned from Ethiopia with copies, and even then they weren't even translated into English until 1821. But the high degree ceremonial body was incorporating components as early as the 1740s, and it's this historical anomaly that's really flushed out in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. And the book plays into a lot of what's going on within Freemasonry when you get into these concepts of what's going on in the rituals, especially in the Blue Lodge, and then you get into the high degree system and how the rituals vary and kind of continue the story. The Book of Enoch becomes very important, and really it serves as the basis as what is going on in this high degree ritual named after the biblical patriarch, the Royal Arch of Enoch.
Now, you write that this degree has defined the American national character, including but not limited to the template of the District of Columbia. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Bruce. It's a heavy question, but I'll do my best to summarize it in general. What you have going on is, and again, I'm just going to have to backpedal just a little bit just to give your listeners some background as to why this high degree is so important. In the Blue Lodge of Freemasonry, you have these 3 degrees which I mentioned: entered apprentice, fellow craft, master mason. And I'm trying to make this as short as possible just because of time. But in this 3rd degree ritual, in the Blue Lodge, the candidate portrays a character called Hiram Abiff, who is the chief architect of Solomon's Temple. Hiram Abiff possesses this secret word. It's often called the lost word of a master mason. The word is the name of God. It's the secret name of God, that through correctly pronunciating, all wisdom is symbolically restored. And this is sort of what's going on in this Royal Arch of Enoch ritual. To make a long story incredibly short, when Hiram Abiff is killed, the word is lost in the Blue Lodge. It's gone forever. You fast forward to this high degree ceremonial, the Royal Arch of Enoch. The word, this word that Hiram Abiff had that is lost, is recovered. The second temple is being built on the Temple Mount. A trapdoor is sprung, and this subterranean underground treasure vault is found with this sacred word in it. And it's through the correct pronunciation of this word that the wisdom is restored from the pillars of Enoch. And it's really this ritual and these philosophies and the symbols associated with it that are really helping define the United States of America and, the federal district as well. And you get into a lot of solar symbolisms with this, within the Blue Lodge. You get into solar symbolisms in the Royal Arch of Enoch. The name of God is concealed on a gold triangle, which is a solar emblem. The sun's rays penetrate the vault, which makes the word readable and discoverable. So you get into a lot of solar iconography with this. You'll find this in the federal district with the Washington Monument, which is an obelisk which was sacred to an Egyptian sun god called Amun-Re. You get into the United States Capitol, the dome on the Capitol. A domed building is a chamber of the sun god Apollo. So you have the idea of the of the federal Capitol building being this chamber of New Age light or wisdom or enlightenment. And then, of course, you have the White House, which is where the chief executive resides. And of course, these 3 structures, which really are the symbols, the primary symbols within the federal district, form a Pythagorean right triangle. And this is an emblem of a Masonic worshipful master. This denotes Masonic rulership. The worshipful master sits in the east, denoting the rising sun. You get into the idea of the Pythagorean theorem being a solar emblem. One side represents Osiris, one side represents Isis, and the other other side is Horus, their perfected sun child. But then you also get into the idea of, within the federal district, that the two elected branches of government are connected by the hypotenuse of this federal triangle. This was Pennsylvania Avenue. Pennsylvania is naturally the keystone state, and this ties into Royal Arch symbology. A keystone is what creates an archway, or an arch. An arch can't exist without a keystone, and a keystone is critically important within Royal Arch symbolism and a lot of the other high degree symbols as well. So you get into a ton of just Royal Arch symbology and Masonic symbology in general, and solar symbology going on inside the federal district. It's a long study. Believe me, I have loads of material on this in the book.
That's amazing. Now, before we continue, and there's other points of interest that obviously you write in your book, the Royal Arch of Enoch, and we obviously in an hour won't be able to cover all of it, so I would encourage people to purchase the book and take a look for themselves. It will be well worth their time. But why do you suppose that it was important for the Masons to embed all of the symbolism into the architecture and the design of all of these buildings?
Well, what is you have going on with this architecture, and the incorporation of sacred geometry, things like the Vesica Pisces, the golden ratio, these ideas related to the Royal Arch of Enoch. The ritual involves the idea of perfection of the candidate, perfection of the initiate. So the idea is, by incorporating a lot of this high degree Masonic symbolism, it's a symbol of perfection, and it's perfected architecture, and thus it's a perfected city. And then you get into the astrological components of this with the alignments, to the sun and to different constellations. You get into, I talk about it much more in the book. This is the Hermetic maxim of as above, so below, the alignments of buildings to certain star systems and constellations. For example, I'll just give you one off the bat. You have the United States Supreme Court building where the cornerstone was dropped on October 13th. This symbolically invests the building with the constellation Libra. The sun is highest in Libra on October 13th. And of course, the Supreme Court is the judicial branch. Of course, Libra is the great scales of justice in the sky. So you symbolically invest the building with Libra. Thus, the cornerstone is dropped on October 13th. The idea and motivation behind doing this is that by aligning the building to these stars and to planets, since they're closer to God in heaven than we are, you're symbolically drawing down the heavens, drawing down divinity, and putting it into your building. It's a form of Christianity. It's Christian mysticism is what it is. It comes straight out of the world of a man named Raymond Lully, who was a medieval Christian Kabbalist and was interested in mysticism. And he talked about how the zodiac and astrology and astronomy was, and by doing what I'm talking about with these, incorporating these astrological motifs, you are turning your building into a forever memory temple. A Dominican friar named Giordano Bruno also picked up on this, and it comes out of what is called the Hermetic maxim, and this is what's called as above, so below. And to make a long story incredibly short, this is part of the Emerald Tablet that's carried around by this character called Hermes Trismegistus. And Hermes in the Royal Arch of Enoch mythology, I would want to say, is a very critical character. He in the Masonic lore, he is actually the restorer of the 7 liberal arts and sciences from this Enochian subterranean vault, by correctly pronouncing this secret word of a master mason. So you have this Hermes Trismegistus, as above, so below influence coming from the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. And again, the idea and motivation behind it is you're symbolically drawing down divinity from the heavens and investing it into your building and the architecture.
Interesting. So I understand there's an Enochic Masonic template at the Union College of Schenectady, New York. Is that right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. My book is the only one that really documents this, and this comes out of the original Royal Arch of Enoch degree certificate in the United States, where in the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, this secret word is recovered in the York rite. It's recovered on the Ark of the Covenant, and in the Scottish rite, it's recovered on the foundation stone, which the Ark of the Covenant used to rest upon. And in the degree certificate, the Ark of the Covenant is replaced with a rising sun. And what it really is, and I'm condensing a ton of material here, it's a symbolic changeover from Hebrew Kabbalah to Egyptian solar symbolism. And the template of Union College of Schenectady, New York, was done by a man named J.J. Remy, who moved within Masonic circles. Union College in the United States was the first college established after the United States won the Revolution, and it was the first college to offer high degrees in civil engineering or operative masonry. And the aerial view, the aerial template, is actually the Royal Arch ceremonial. It's the sunburst. It's the domed building, which is the sun coming out of the quadrangle, which is the vault of Enoch, with the sunburst around it, symbolizing the restoration of this wisdom from this Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. So you have the idea of this, of this college forming a nexus with this Royal Arch ceremonial, the restoration of wisdom, and naturally Union College was the first college to offer degrees in civil engineering, which is of course operative Freemasonry.
Now, how does the Erie Canal fit into this?
Well, you have the Erie Canal right there with Union College, and what you have with the Erie Canal was the expansion of the United States westward, and the idea was that by expanding the United States westward, a lot of the Freemasons believed that you were also symbolically expanding Freemasonry westward. And when the Erie, and again, this ties into the works of a man named Salem Town, and believe me, I'm plowing over I could literally spend 3 hours lecturing on this, but I'm just going over it as quickly as possible. He talked about, Salem Town was a Freemason, and he talked about how the westward expansion of Masonry was similar to the recovery of this lost word of a Master Mason. This is mentioned in the fourth Gospel of St. John, the Word of God. And that the westward expansion of the United States was symbolically expanding this lost word of a Master Mason westward. It's Logos. It's God Himself. And the idea was, what you have going on with the Erie Canal is you have literally tons of Masonic symbolism going on with the opening of the Erie Canal. It was opened in a Royal Arch ceremonial. An archway was actually created over one of the lock systems. The Royal Arch Freemasons came down and blessed it in a Royal Arch ceremonial. This was orchestrated by a Royal Arch Mason named Ezra Ames. This was all done under the aegis of a Royal Arch Freemason named Dewitt Clinton. And you have the idea of the Erie Canal spreading the United States westward was at the same time spreading Freemasonry and Royal Arch of Enoch Freemasonry, and thus this lost word of a Master Mason, God Himself, westward. And you'll find evidence of this. Again, you have the opening celebration or the ceremonial with the Erie Canal, and it's in my book. If you actually see when the Erie Canal was opened, I want to say in 1826, the ball ticket, they had an Erie Canal ball, and if you look at the ball ticket, it actually features the caduceus of Hermes on it, and of course this ties into Hermes Trismegistus, this major figure within the Royal Arch of Enoch legend and lore.
Wow. Now, can you tell us about the Benjamin Latrobe Robert Mills template / architecture of Baltimore, Maryland?
Yeah, absolutely. To talk about that, you have to understand a little bit about what's going in Washington, D.C., which I talked about a little bit. And I'll just backpedal real quick because it's the same guys. It's the same Freemasons. You have Benjamin Henry Latrobe. He's really considered the godfather of American architecture. He's responsible for the domed building, the domed Capitol building on a hill overlooking the Washington Monument. And the Washington Monument, the obelisk, was done by a man named Robert Mills, who was also a Freemason. And you'll find this architecture completely paralleled in Baltimore, Maryland, where Latrobe creates his second domed building, which is the Baltimore Basilica, and that sits on a hill right here in downtown Baltimore, and that overlooks the Baltimore Washington Monument, which actually predates the obelisk in Washington, D.C. The Baltimore Basilica is, of course, Benjamin Henry Latrobe, and the Baltimore Washington Monument is none other than Robert Mills, who is the man responsible for the obelisk in the Federal District. The Baltimore Washington Monument, and what you have is you have the domed building overlooking the Washington Monument, and what it's sort of on a symbolic level doing, it's investing Washington, the Masonic godfather of the new nation, as the solar Enochian figure, which you actually find, believe it or not, in engravings, after Washington died, and sermons equating Washington to Enoch. But you have the idea of the domed building investing Washington with this Enochian solar symbolism. Of course, you have the obelisk, which is, of course, a solar emblem. But then in Baltimore, you have the Baltimore Washington Monument, which has Washington sitting on top of it. The Baltimore Washington Monument is a replication of something in Rome called Trajan's Column, which was a monument that was dedicated to this Roman military general Trajan. And you have this paralleled with Washington, who's, of course, the commander of the American forces. But you also have this deep, very symbolic Enochian symbolism going on with the Baltimore Washington Monument. It's a replication of Trajan's Column, and Trajan's Column in Rome sits in something called Trajan's Forum, and that sat between two libraries, one Greek, one Latin. And again, this ties into this idea of this restoration of this Enochian antediluvian wisdom that the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial is symbolically, it's part of its lore and legend and underlying philosophy. So even, you have these complete architectural duplications or paralleling each other in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, and it's all coming out of Freemasonry and this one particular high-degree ceremonial called the Royal Arch of Enoch.
We're speaking with Robert W. Sullivan IV. He's the author of the Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism. And he's also the author of another great book called Cinema Symbolism. And you can find out more information about Robert and his books at Robert W. Sullivan IV, which stands for the fourth, robertwsullivan.iv.com. Now, Robert, your book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, even reveals information regarding the Seal of California as Masonic Enochian symbol lifted from the seals of two California Oddfellow lodges, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Bruce. If you do, I documented in the book, and I have pictures of it all in the book. If you look at the Oddfellow seal of the State Grand Lodge, and this is set up immediately when California is set up, the seal of the Oddfellows Lodge completely parallels it looks just like it. In fact, it has Minerva on it. It looks just like the seal of the state of California. And the first Oddfellow Lodge also has this exact same emblem. And this was coming out of the world of a Freemason and Oddfellow named Leland Stanford. And the idea of Minerva appearing there is most likely coming off of the seal of Union College of Schenectady of New York, which we already talked about. The seal of Union College is Minerva, who is this wisdom goddess. And again, this ties into the idea of this restoration of this antediluvian wisdom, which this Royal Arch of Enoch ritual is all about. And in fact, the seal of Union is not only Minerva, but it has the Masonic logo of "We are all brothers under the law of Minerva." And Minerva turns up on this Oddfellows seal. And again, this is the works of this man named Leland Stanford. Of course, he's the founder of Stanford University. And you have this picked up on this California state seal, and it's all completely Enochian, where you have to understand, I'm just going to backpedal a little bit. You have the in the Royal Arch ceremonial, in the underlying philosophy. Let me just say that the ritual is they're building the second temple. This trap door is discovered on the Temple Mount. This subterranean vault is discovered, and under 9 archways is this treasure, this name of God, these pillars of Enoch that contains all this antediluvian wisdom on it. What happens in the ritual is Enoch goes into the afterlife, into heaven, interacts with the Watchers, interacts with the archangels, gleans all this wisdom, comes back to earth, realizes the flood of Noah is coming, and decides to trick God because he knows God's trying to eradicate this wisdom with the flood, creates the subterranean vault, inscribes all the wisdom on these 2 pillars, puts the name of God between it, and it's only through the correct pronunciation of this word that the pillars can be restored. In the Masonic ritual and its lore, the treasure vault had already been penetrated by these 2 characters. The first was Hermes Trismegistus, who correctly pronounces the word, restores the 7 liberal arts and science, pillar back to mankind, English, reading, writing, things like that. The other character is a Greek mathematician named Pythagoras, sees the lost word, has his eureka moment, I have found it, meaning the name of God, correctly pronunciates it, and restores mathematics, restores the mathematical pillar back to mankind. So in the California State Seal, you have the word eureka, which is an esoteric reference to Pythagoras, correctly pronouncing the word of a master mason. You have the lost word of a master mason. You have Minerva appearing on it, and again, this would tie into Minerva's a Greco-Roman wisdom goddess, and again, this ties into the restoration of this antediluvian wisdom. And then exoterically, you have the little miner digging there, and of course, this is completely Enochian on a symbolic Masonic level. This is the guy digging towards this subterranean vault where all this hidden wisdom is contained. So in the Seal of California, you have both the exoteric and esoteric emblems going on, and of course, esoterically, you have the word eureka, you have the little miner digging towards the underground subterranean vault, and you fuse that with Minerva, and voila, you have this huge, gigantic Masonic, Enochian, high-degree symbol, which is the State Seal of California.
Most people who saw National Treasure, they saw the overt story of Freemasonry, but I understand there was also symbolism in that movie, wasn't there?
Oh, absolutely. And, this ties into, Bruce, not only this book, but my second book, Cinema Symbolism. I mean, I know we've already done a show about that, but to make a long story really short, when I was writing Royal Arch of Enoch and I was finishing it off, I wanted to end the book, I kind of wanted to bring the book up to modern day. So I took on the idea, or I took on, presenting movies that contained this hidden Masonic, solar, Enochian symbolism. And one of them is the National Treasure movie. And the truth be told, I mean, some of it, like you correctly said, is a little overt. I mean, it's easy to see. But what people may not be aware of is that the National Treasure movie, this is National Treasure 1 with Nicolas Cage, is actually a Masonic ritual. If you sit down and watch the Royal Arch of Enoch, the National Treasure movie, you're actually watching the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, and again, the ritual, this high-degree ritual, again, it's the 13th in the Scottish Rite, it's the 7th in the York Rite, documents the recovery of this lost word of a Master Mason, and it occurs on the Temple Mount, on the Holy Ground, while they're building the Second Temple. This secret trap door is sprung, and this subterranean vault is discovered where this hidden treasure is. And of course, this is the National Treasure movie, where you have the guys, the Nicolas Cage character, looking for this Masonic treasure, and where is it kept? I mean, where does he find it? He finds it in New York, beneath the Holy Ground in New York, Trinity College, in this subterranean vault. And, this is where the treasure is. And again, it's a complete retelling. The National Treasure movie is a complete retelling cinematically of the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. So if you want to watch this movie, if you want to watch this ritual on the big screen, just watch a National Treasure. You're literally watching the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial.
That's really interesting. Now, we can look back to the early days of this nation and see the influence of Freemasonry, as you said, through a lot of the architecture. Do you think that Freemasonry is as influential today as it was then?
That's a great question. I think it's still influential, and I think its influence is beginning to come back a little bit. What you had going on when the country was founded, Freemasonry was looked at very positively. It was considered this great patriotic order. Mm-hmm. But around the 1800s, in the early 1800s, you had these high degree systems coming into effect with the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. And what has to be understood is within Freemasonry, there is no Grand Lodge of the United States. Each state is an entity is under its own jurisdiction. So I'm in Maryland, so you'd have the State Grand Lodge of Maryland is who I would be under. But if you were in New York, you would be under the State Grand Lodge of New York, Pennsylvania, the State Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, and so on and so forth. The high degree system allowed a Mason to, once they got into this, to operate over state lines and to formulate policy with other Masons over state lines. And this was being done by a very influential Freemason. He was a former mayor of New York and governor named Dewitt Clinton. And it's really after the death of Washington in 1799 that Dewitt Clinton really picks up the mantle of Washington, and he's using Freemasonry to formulate the United States. I mean, Dewitt Clinton is the guy behind the Erie Canal. He's influential with the Union College template. I mean, it's him who's really turning America. I mean, using Masonry to define America. But what happens in the mid 1820s, this guy named William Morgan threatens to expose a lot of the secrets of Freemasonry. In New York, in Batavia, New York, he's abducted by Freemasons, and he's taken over the border into Canada, where we don't know what happened to him, but he's killed. And at any rate, there's this kangaroo court. The Masons are tried and acquitted. DeWitt Clinton even gets involved with this. And there was this huge backlash in the country where Masonry, all but went out of business. It had to distance itself from any sort of idea of being this, Western mystery school or the keepers of Hermeticism. This was all completely thrown under the bus. Masonry emerged as just a fraternal order that helped widows and orphans and just did charity work. And it was really this philosophy that really carried Masonry forward through the 19th century and into the 20th century, and even up until the late 20th century. And I think that with the advent of the internet and things like the National Treasure movies and Dan Brown, there really seems to be this real revival within Freemasonry. And I've always thought it was influential. I don't think it ever really waned, but it definitely took a hit in the 19th century. But I think there's definitely more interested in Freemasonry today, and I think the interest is also that the idea of the symbols, the esotericisms. This seems to be definitely becoming more full in focus than it was, say, even 20 or 30 years ago. And again, it's a leftover from the William Morgan affair. But I would definitely say, Masonry was definitely influential in creating this country. And its influence, I don't think that really ever went away. It sort of changed philosophically. But I would say that as of today, the interest in Freemasonry, really is more of a study in its esoteric symbolisms. This seems to be the case.
When I was a teenager, I was D. Malay. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So now this was very fascinating. I never knew this part of Freemasonry. So DeWitt Clinton was trying to unify a national Grand Lodge. If we could kind of speculate, what would that have meant had he been able to do that?
Oh no, he wasn't trying to unify a national Grand Lodge. That never exists. That's never part of the equation. What he is doing is he's using the high degree system, mainly of the York Rite. This was coming out of the works of a man named Thomas Smith Webb. What happened was, and again, this is just an incredibly long story. Believe me, we again, I could speak on this for an hour. But the high degrees are developed in Paris, France, in the 1740s, 1750s. They are midwifed into the United States. It's 25 degrees. The 25 degrees ultimately become the degrees 4 through 33 of the Scottish Rite, and a Lodge of Perfection is set up in Albany, New York, and it influences a man named Thomas Smith Webb, who is the godfather of the York Rite. Webb in 1797 publishes his Illustrations of Freemasonry, which it's the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, but he tacks on 4 additional degrees, which serve as the template of the York Rite. But at any rate, when DeWitt Clinton is operating, he is using these high degrees, both of the York Rite and the Scottish Rite, to formulate. Masons. If I was beholden to the Grand Lodge of Maryland back then, I would just be beholden to the Grand Lodge of Maryland. Right. If I went into New York, my only interaction with Freemasons would be to be invited into a Blue Lodge that would be under the aegis of the Grand Lodge of New York. But if I was in a high degree body, I could intermingle with other high degree Masons away from the Grand Lodge system, and it was a much more easier way to formulate policy away from the Grand Lodge than in the high degree system than in the Blue Lodge. And it's really the high degrees that allow this formulation, this policy development, and it's Dewitt Clinton who is really doing this. I mean, Dewitt Clinton is accused. I mean, this is no secret. The idea of Masonry and these higher degrees being, these secret degrees that Masons are using to formulate policy. I mean, where have you heard this before? I mean, doesn't this sound like the Bavarian Illuminati? Right. I mean, that's what Dewitt Clinton gets accused of. There are many people who come out and say this guy Clinton is an agent of the Illuminati. They call it the Colombian Illuminati, and DeWitt Clinton is allegedly, a part of this. I mean, he is the guy who is really using these high degrees to formulate policy. And again, if you wish to see the fingerprints of this, you'll find it in the Erie Canal. You'll find it with, he's the governor of New York. He's a former mayor of New York. The Erie Canal, the Union College thing, the political machine that ultimately becomes Tammany Hall. This comes out of the world of DeWitt Clinton. I mean, New York, the Empire State. What's the Empire State? I mean, it's the Masonic Empire. This is again coming straight out of the world of DeWitt Clinton. And he is really the guy who is using these high degrees to really craft the United States into a Masonic republic.
He failed, right? So what would it have looked like had he succeeded?
Oh, I think he did succeed.
Oh, yeah.
I have in the book, I call the United States of America the world's first Masonic republic. And, it is without question that the entire template of the United States is Masonic from start to finish. I don't think he failed. You have the United States Constitution as a Masonic document. The Declaration of Independence is a Masonic document. The federal government, the triple division of government is Freemasonic. The Royal Arch, the United States President is a Royal Arch of Enoch Sun priest. This all comes out of the works of, Renaissance Kabbalist masters. Most of the state seals have Masonic overtones. We talked about the California one. The whole country is just one Masonic symbol after another. You'll find this with state colleges and universities. You'll find it on their seals. The whole college fraternity system is Freemasonic. In the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, in the Royal Arch of Enoch book, I have a chapter called the United States of Freemasonry, where I document this country is just one gigantic Masonic republic.
How is the Constitution a Masonic document?
You have the triple division of government between a Sun priest known as the United States President and the White House itself is a replication of a Masonic temple in Dublin, Ireland. I talk about that in the book. The guy behind that is a man named James Hoban, who is a Freemason. The triple division of government between an executive and a legislator and a judicial comes straight out of the world of Blue Lodge Freemasonry, where the governance in a Blue Lodge is triple divided between a worshipful master, a junior warden, and a senior warden. And this is again another solar emblem, or symbol. The worshipful master sits in the east. In a Masonic Blue Lodge, the worshipful master, that's the guy who runs the lodge, sits in the east representing the rising sun. The junior warden sits in the south representing the sun at meridian or midday, and the senior warden sits in the west representing the setting sun. So the triple division of government within a Blue Lodge is coming straight out. The triple division of government of the United States is coming straight out of the Blue Lodge, and again, it's a solar icon. And again, you'll find this in the architecture of the United States, and you'll find it just in the base governance of the United States. When you get into, and I'll just get into this real quick, I get into much more in the book. When you get into the federal district, you will get into this work by a Dominican friar named the City of the Sun, and it talks about The full title of the book is The City of the Sun, or a dialogue between a Genoese sea captain and a Grand Master of the Knights Hospitalier. Campanella was a Dominican friar. It's a very Neoplatonic work. It has a lot of solar symbolism in it, but it's a story of this man going to this new world's capital. And when he gets there, the first thing he sees is this giant building sitting on a hill. This is the Capitol building, has a dome on it, and the whole city is run by the sun priest, who is, of course, ultimately becomes the United States president, and he presides over, a legislative branch. This is, of course, the Congress and the Senate. So I tie into all this as well, and of course, it's a solar emblem. I mean, the novel's called The City of the Sun. So you will find these deep Masonic solar symbolisms going on in the United States Constitution, in the formulation of the United States. Not only architecturally, but just embedded in the government as well.
Talk about how the Statue of Liberty is a Royal Arch Enochian symbol.
Well, you have with the Statue of Liberty, it's a gift from the French Grand Lodge to the Masons in America. It's actually a repackaged gift. It was originally a gift for the Egyptians. They didn't want it. A lot of the guys behind the Statue of Liberty were Freemasons. The Latrobe, what's his name? The names are escaping me. The two men who were on the French side, who were behind the Statue of Liberty, Laboulaye, and I forget the other guy's name, you were all Freemasons. The actual pedestal, who was a Mason named Robert Hunt Morris, that it sits upon. To make a long story short, the Statue of Liberty, which sits in New York Harbor, and again, New York is the Masonic Empire state. The Statue of Liberty is overloaded with the number 7. I document it much more in the book, but you will find the 7 points on the crown. The height of the Statue of Liberty reflects the number 7. The number 7 is all over the place with the Statue of Liberty, and this, of course, is paralleling this the 7th degree in the York Rite, which comes out of New York, by the way. And of course, it's the 7th degree in the York Rite is the Royal Arch of Enoch. I mean, of course, Liberty carries the light of wisdom, of illumination, and again, this ties into the whole thing with bringing in light and wisdom, enlightenment coming out of this Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. But to make a long story short, and I get into it much more in the book, the Statue of Liberty is a temple, really, to the number 7, and this is symbolizing the 7th degree in the York Rite, the Royal Arch of Enoch.
When we said that Dewitt Clinton succeeded, there are probably listeners that are freaking out that they're living in the United States of Freemasonry. Is this something our listeners should be concerned about, or just business as usual?
Oh, I don't think it's anything to worry about. I think the concern with it is, I think the paranoia with it is, there was no transparency when this was done. People are seeing it today and seeing this Masonic architecture and thinking this is evidence of this demonic, overarching Freemasonic conspiracy. It was never intended to be that way. I think if George Washington in 1791 had published a Masonic treatise, or a treatise saying, listen, we're creating this federal city, we're going to incorporate a lot of the, principles and doctrines of Freemasonry in it, and again, this ties into ideas of sacred geometry, maybe a little mysticism, things like that. My gut feeling is if something like this had been published in 1791, I don't think most people in America would have really cared. I think their attitude towards it would have been, as long as it's not intruding on me, intruding on my family and my ability to earn an income or make a living, go right ahead. But again, there was really no transparency with this, and I think that's the problem with it is because there was no transparency. People see this as this overarching, sort of conspiracy where it was never really intended to be that. It was just you had people who were founding the country who were very impressed with Freemasonry. They were members of the fraternity. They liked the teachings and the system of morality and the symbols, and what was going on and what was being taught in the Blue Lodge and the high degrees, and they were very impressed with this. And they took the lessons of Freemasonry and turned it into a country. But I don't think it was anything sinister. I don't think it was meant to be anything evil or anything like that. I understand the suspicion around it. Believe me, I mean, I really do. I mean, I get it all. I mean, I've gotten emails on this numerous times, but I think the issue was there was really no transparency with it. But I don't think it was ever intended to be anything sinister or anything. I think it was just men who were very impressed with the teachings of the Fraternal Order were using Freemasonry to craft the country. But again, I don't think there was really no transparency with it, and I think that leads to a lot of the suspicion with it. But again, I just want to say I don't think there was ever any sort of evil or sinister intent behind any of this.
Very intriguing, compelling information. Robert W. Sullivan IV, he's the author of The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy and Symbolism. And you can find out more information about Robert and his books at robertwsullivan.iv.com. Robert, thank you. This has been wonderful. Your book is great, and I hope to talk to you again sometime.
Well, thank you, Bruce, for having me on your show. It was wonderful to be here with you again. And I just want to say I thought it was a tremendous show, and I really appreciate you having me on. And I thought it was great. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to thank my guest this week, Robert Sullivan, for appearing on our program. And remember, his book is The Royal Arch of Enoch. And thank you also for listening to our program each and every week. I really appreciate it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Bruce Collins at The Bruce Collins Show. Thank you so much for joining us each and every week, Fridays at midnight on WWPR 1490 AM. We would ask that you would support all of your favorite charities that help to spread the gospel, clothe the needy, and feed the hungry. You can do that as thanks for listening to our program. We ask of no monetary payback from you, only your listenership and your dedication to making the world a better place. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Bruce Collins Show, where you can find us every Friday night at midnight here at WWPR 1490 AM. Remember, God loves you. We do too. Don't give up.